In this lesson, we'll take a look at some of the additional attributes found in the glossy refract node. So, picking up where we left off in the first segment of this lesson, we were able to see how we could use the glossy refract node as a way of adding these really soft, blurred refraction effects. However, there are a few extra nodes that we can use to really kind of give us sort of an interesting, sort of a faked subsurface scattering effect. And that can be done with the use of the top, deep, and back materials. So what we need to do in order to fully utilize this is to start to drop in a couple of additional materials in here. So we can use any of the base shaders for this particular effect. And just to start to give this a little bit more variance, let's come in and make sure that we have the diffuse color set to something a little bit different, so that way it becomes a little bit easier to see this effect. So we'll take a Lambert material and middle click, drop it into the deep material port. There we go, and we'll save this for comparison. Now right now we actually won't actually see any kind of an effect until we start to increase this max distance. With the max distance set to 0, it will only calculate the top material. So the distance really just controls how far into a surface this ray is able to penetrate before it starts to report back some kind of a different material. So let's give the max distance of something like 2. We'll start with that. Again, we'll save this for comparison and just re-render. And you can see that when this renders, we really are not able to see any kind of a refractive effect happening as far as being able to see all the way through this material. However, you can see that once this actual ray is able to pass a certain distance into the surface, it actually starts to report back now this blue material. And you can start to see how we get a little bit more of this foggy kind of an interior effect. These little inner parts that we were able to see fairly clearly before, you can now see they start to fade out. So we can start to introduce a little bit more of this by increasing this max distance. That will let the rays penetrate a little bit further in and start to give this a little less of an opaque look. And you can see how that will start to make this interior appear a little less cloudy and start to let a little bit more of this visibility come through. If you compare what we had before to what we have now. Now we can just barely start to see some of the actual patterns that are on the backside of this die. If you compare what we had originally, this is really starting to now take on a little bit more of a kind of a faked subsurface scattering effect. So now all we would have to do is plug in some kind of a back material. So this is what the material will return once the ray actually passes all the way through the geometry, and then it comes time to report that ray back to the camera. So in a lot of circumstances, this can start to be a little bit darker color. So again, we'll take this, middle click, drop it into the back material, and let's re-render. Save this for comparison. And you can start to see how anywhere where we can start to see the backside of any kind of a normal being rendered, in our case these little divots and indentions, we can right now see the backsides of those. And so anywhere where we're seeing some kind of a reversed normal, we'll now basically dictate that that will be rendered with this back material. So overall, this becomes really kind of an interesting way of simulating some of these faked volumetric effects, or faking some kind of a subsurface type effect where we actually want the ray to be able to pass partially through our geometry and then return something different than what we would normally see just on the surface. So that's a look at how we can use some of these additional attributes found on the glossy refract node.